History has a weird habit of leaving behind one clue, 10 bad theories, and a giant argument that never dies. In this video, we're going through 33 historical mysteries that still refuse to sit still. Vanished colonies, missing tombs, ghost ships, fake maps, royal secrets, and cases where the official answer feels just a little too convenient. Some of these are creepy, some are absurd, and a few are honestly suspicious enough to make your ancestors look like they were hiding receipts. 1. Jack the Ripper is still the king of unresolved historical nightmares because the case has everything: brutal murders, terrified streets, chaotic police work, creepy letters, and more suspects than a bad detective show. In 1888, at least 5 women were murdered in Whitechapel, and the violence was so shocking that people instantly started inventing theories at full speed. Ever since then, the Ripper has been blamed on doctors, artists, aristocrats, random locals, and basically any Victorian man who looked like he owned a dark coat. The biggest problem is painfully simple. The evidence was badly handled, poorly recorded, or never collected properly in the first place. So the most famous serial killer in history remains a faceless shadow wrapped in newspaper hysteria. The mystery survives because the case was messy from day one, and Victorian London basically turned panic into an art form. 2. The Dyatlov Pass incident feels like a horror film written by a mountain. In 1959, 9 experienced hikers died in the Ural Mountains after apparently cutting their tent open from the inside and running into the freezing night with barely any clothes. That one detail alone is enough to make your brain start inventing monsters. Some bodies were found near a cedar tree, others farther away, and a few had injuries dramatic enough to turn the case into a magnet for every theory on Earth. Avalanches, secret military tests, infrasound, yetis, aliens, cursed snow, take your pick. Modern analysis leans toward a natural explanation involving unstable snow, brutal weather, and panic under impossible conditions. Which is honestly scarier. No beast, no conspiracy, just nature deciding your survival plan has been rejected without appeal. The missing piece is not whether something terrifying happened. It absolutely did. The mystery is exactly how fast everything went wrong. 3. The Bermuda Triangle is one of history's greatest examples of humans seeing a dangerous place, and deciding danger alone is somehow not dramatic enough. This region between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico became famous for vanished ships and aircraft, but the actual story is less supernatural and more brutally practical. It is a heavily traveled area with sudden storms, rough seas, strong currents, navigation errors, human overconfidence, and the kind of weather that can ruin your week and erase the evidence. Still, once newspapers and pop culture got involved, the place turned into an oceanic theater production starring aliens, sea monsters, magnetic weirdness, and portals to somewhere very inconvenient. Scientists have never found anything uniquely paranormal there. The ocean is simply dangerous enough on its own. That may be the least magical answer possible, but it is also the most humbling. The sea does not need a curse. It already has physics, weather, and zero sympathy. 4. Roanoke is the kind of mystery that makes historians stare at one carved word for centuries and somehow never get bored of it. In 1587, English settlers founded a colony on Roanoke Island. Their governor, John White, returned to England for supplies, got delayed by war, and did not make it back until 1590. When he finally returned, the colony was empty. No obvious battle scene, no pile of skeletons, no neat ending. Just the word Croatoan carved into a post, like history left a clue, and then walked off laughing. The strongest theory is that the settlers moved and joined local indigenous communities, especially on nearby Croatoan Island. That is far more plausible than a supernatural mass disappearance, but the lack of final proof keeps the mystery alive. Roanoke survives because it offers the perfect historical frustration. Enough evidence to suggest an answer, not enough to shut everyone up. 5. Medieval dancing plagues sound made up by somebody who got too excited writing a sermon, but chroniclers described outbreaks where groups of people danced uncontrollably for days, sometimes until collapse. The most famous case hit Strasbourg in 1518, though it was not the only one. Imagine looking out your window and seeing half the town trapped in a nightmare flash mob. At the time, people blamed spirits, curses, divine punishment, and other classic medieval explanations. Modern historians lean toward mass psychological distress, social contagion, religious fear, and the crushing stress of life in an age already packed with famine, disease, and misery. In other words, people may have broken down together in a way their culture could only express through movement. It sounds bizarre because it is bizarre, but that is what makes it so fascinating. This was not just odd behavior. It may have been collective panic turning into choreography, which is both tragic and deeply unsettling. 6. The Man in the Iron Mask is the perfect royal mystery because even the title sounds like it was focus grouped for maximum drama. The prisoner was real, but the famous Iron Mask was probably more legend than fact. Historical evidence suggests he wore a black velvet mask, which is less theatrical but still extremely suspicious. He was held during the reign of Louis XIV, moved between prisons under heavy secrecy, and died in the Bastille in 1703. Authorities worked so hard to hide his identity that they guaranteed future generations would become completely normal about it. Which, of course, did not happen. Was he a disgraced noble, an unwanted witness, a political prisoner, or some royal embarrassment the monarchy preferred to lock in a box and forget? Writers later made the theory pool even more chaotic, especially with the famous twin brother angle. Historians have suggested several identities, but none has closed the case. Some secrets age badly. This one aged into a legend. 7. Mary Celeste is what happens when the sea hands history a mystery and then refuses to explain the setup. In 1872, the ship was found adrift in the Atlantic, still seaworthy, with cargo largely intact and no obvious signs of violence. But the captain, his family, and the crew were gone. Just gone. No fight scene, no farewell note, no convenient villain leaning on a barrel. Naturally, people lost their minds. Theories included mutiny, piracy, sea monsters, giant squid, insurance fraud, and all the other classics humans reach for when reality gets rude. The most likely explanation is far more ordinary and therefore more chilling. The crew may have feared an explosion from alcohol fumes, abandoned ship temporarily in panic, and then been unable to get back. One bad call, one bad moment, and the ocean does the rest. Mary Celeste remains famous because it feels impossible, even though the likeliest answer is painfully human. 8. The Beast of Gévaudan sounds like folklore, but the terror it caused in 18th century France was very real. Between 1764 and 1767, a mysterious creature was blamed for a series of deadly attacks in the Gévaudan region. Witnesses describe something wolf-like but bigger, stranger, and much too willing to attack people. Hunters failed to stop it. Officials failed to explain it. Royal attention got involved. At that point, you know a story has gone fully out of control. Over time, theories multiplied. A giant wolf, several wolves, a wolf-dog hybrid, an escaped exotic animal, mass exaggeration, or some ugly combination of all of them. Eventually, a man named Jean Chastel was credited with killing the beast, but even that did not settle things because the reports were already tangled up with fear, rumor, and spectacle. The mystery survives because everyone wants one answer, while the evidence keeps muttering, "Best I can do is chaos." 9. King Arthur is either a real leader buried under centuries of storytelling or the most successful historical fan fiction ever produced. Medieval legend gave us Camelot, Merlin, Excalibur, heroic battles, noble knights, and enough symbolism to fill several kingdoms. Historians, being the stubborn people they are, keep asking whether there was an actual person behind the myth. Some think Arthur may preserve memories of a real war leader in post-Roman Britain, a figure who resisted Saxon advances and later got upgraded into a legend with premium features. Others argue Arthur is a literary blend of different traditions, heroes, and political needs, stitched together over time until the original human, if there was one, disappeared completely. That is the real mystery. Not whether there was literally a wizard on payroll, but whether a genuine historical figure got swallowed by poetry, nationalism, and centuries of people refusing to leave a good story alone. 10. The Wow. Signal is the kind of mystery that makes even serious scientists look up at the sky and quietly wonder whether the universe once prank-called us. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio detected a powerful narrowband signal during a search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Astronomer Jerry Amon saw the printout and wrote, "Wow," beside it, which is honestly one of the most relatable scientific reactions in history. The signal lasted 72 seconds, looked unusually interesting, and then never appeared again. That is the maddening part. If it had repeated, this could be a very different story. But it did not, so we are stuck with one perfect cosmic maybe. Some researchers have proposed natural explanations, but none has completely ended the debate. The signal remains fascinating not just because of what it might have been, but because it forced humanity to think seriously about what proof would even look like if something out there ever decided to say hello. 11. The Nazca lines look like the desert got hired by a giant with excellent penmanship. These enormous geoglyphs in southern Peru include straight lines, geometric forms, and animal figures so large that they only fully make sense from above. Which is why people instantly reach for aliens, because apparently ancient humans are never allowed to be clever on an impressive scale without someone crediting outer space. The Nazca people created the lines by removing the darker surface stones and exposing lighter soil beneath. So the construction method is no longer the big mystery. The purpose is. Were they ritual pathways, water-related symbols, astronomical markers, sacred landscapes, or several things at once? Scholars still debate that. The dry climate preserved them with almost rude efficiency, leaving behind one of the most striking examples of ancient landscape art ever made. The lines are weird, yes, but the truly weird thing is how often humans underestimate other humans. 12. Roman bronze dodecahedra are a wonderful reminder that even the Romans, who documented everything from taxes to toilets, could still leave behind an object that makes modern experts shrug professionally. These hollow 12-sided bronze shapes, covered in holes of different sizes with little knobs on the corners, have been found across parts of the former Roman world. More than 100 are known. Nobody knows for sure what they were for. That is incredible. Theories include measuring devices, candle holders, religious objects, military rangefinders, knitting tools, or status symbols for people who desperately wanted their guests to ask, "What is that thing?" The trouble is that none of the explanations has fully won. No ancient manual has turned up saying, "Congratulations on your new bronze mystery object." So these artifacts sit there looking weird, expensive, and annoyingly silent. In a civilization famous for organization, they remain one gloriously unsolved little failure of labeling. 13. Stonehenge is one of the few monuments that can look instantly familiar and still remain deeply mysterious. We know far more now than people used to. It was built in stages over a long period. Some stones came from surprisingly far away, and the site was clearly important for ritual, gathering, and probably elite symbolism. But that still leaves the central question hanging in the air, like a stubborn fog. Why this exact arrangement, in this exact place, with such obsessive effort? Some scholars emphasize burial and ancestors. Others point to solar alignment, seasonal ceremony, political theater, or a shared sacred landscape where communities gathered for major events. The annoying thing is that several of those ideas may be true at once. Ancient people were perfectly capable of building something that was religious, social, symbolic, and astronomically meaningful without checking which modern category made us most comfortable. Stonehenge survives as a mystery because it is not just a structure. It is a prehistoric statement we still cannot fully translate. 14. The Phaistos disk is one of archaeology's great little headaches, a clay object from ancient Crete covered in symbols arranged in a spiral that nobody has convincingly deciphered. It looks deliberate, elegant, and just strange enough to make every enthusiast on Earth feel personally invited to solve it badly. The signs appear to have been stamped rather than carved, which makes the object feel startlingly sophisticated. But the biggest problem is also the cruelest one. It is unique. There is no shelf full of matching texts, no longer bilingual inscription, no friendly companion artifact saying, "Here is the key." Because of that, theories have gone everywhere. A hymn, a prayer, A legal text, a ritual chant, a game board, a coded message, maybe the world's oldest example of someone being unnecessarily cryptic. Without comparable material, every translation attempt starts strong and ends in smoke. The disc remains famous because it looks so readable while staying stubbornly unread, which is rude behavior for an artifact. 15. The statues of Easter Island are often treated like a puzzle about transportation, but the more interesting mystery is why the Rapa Nui created them in the first place on such a dramatic scale. The Moai were not random giant heads placed around the island because someone wanted a very ambitious landscaping project. They were tied to ancestors, status, sacred power, and ceremonial platforms. These monuments were social memory carved into volcanic stone. For years, outsiders pushed a simplistic story that the islanders destroyed themselves through reckless monument obsession. That version has not aged well. More recent research paints a more complex picture involving environmental strain, changing belief systems, conflict, European contact, and later devastation that outsiders helped cause. So the statues are not evidence of some cartoonish collapse by stupidity. They reflect a highly organized society expressing power, lineage, and identity through monumental art. The mystery is not whether the islanders were foolish. The mystery is how long the world kept telling that lazy story. 16. The Sahara is not just a giant sandbox with an attitude problem. It is full of ancient stone structures that reveal a landscape with a much deeper human past than most people imagine. Across parts of the Sahara and Western Sahara, archaeologists have found circles, tombs, alignments, crescents, and keyhole-shaped monuments, some of them thousands of years old and older than many famous civilizations people actually talk about at dinner. That alone is wild. The harder question is what many of these structures were for. Some were almost certainly funerary. Others may have marked ritual spaces, territories, routes, or celestial alignments. But for many examples, the answer is still frustratingly uncertain because the region is vast, harsh, and still not fully studied. The old image of the Sahara as empty is deeply misleading. It is more like a giant neglected archive under brutal weather. The mystery is not why it looks barren now. The mystery is how much history is still sitting there in plain sight, being ignored by the wind. 17. The collapse of the Indus Valley civilization is unsettling because it does not give us the dramatic ending people usually want. There is no neat invasion scene, no obvious tyrant posing on the ruins, no giant historical thunderclap. The Indus civilization built major cities, impressive drainage systems, standardized weights, and long-distance trade networks. Then, over time, that urban world declined. Not all at once, and probably not for one reason. Scholars point to shifting river systems, climate change, reduced rainfall, agricultural stress, and the weakening of trade. Older invasion theories used to sound bold, but they now look much shakier than they once did. The real mystery is how such an advanced and organized civilization could unravel so gradually that its ending feels less like a fall and more like a slow, draining away of complexity. No final dramatic speech, no flaming finale, just a civilization quietly losing the conditions that had made it work. 18. The Maya collapse is one of those historical phrases that sound simpler than the reality. It was not one giant civilization vanishing overnight into the jungle, like the world's most dramatic disappearing act. The Maya people did not vanish, and their descendants are still here. What collapsed was a particular network of powerful classic period city-states, especially in the southern lowlands, where major centers declined between the late 8th and 9th centuries. Monuments stopped, populations dropped, and cities were abandoned or weakened. Why? Because history rarely respects the human desire for one clean answer. Drought, warfare, political fragmentation, environmental stress, overuse of resources, and declining confidence in ruling elites probably all played a role. In other words, a sophisticated system got squeezed from multiple directions until it stopped functioning. That is what makes the mystery so compelling. It is not a story about disappearance. It is a story about how even brilliant societies can become trapped by the pressures they helped create. 19. The Ninth Roman Legion has become legendary partly because history went quiet at exactly the wrong moment. Legio IX Hispana served in Britain and appears in records around the early 2nd century. Then the paper trail thins out enough for later imagination to sprint straight into the fog. One long-running legend claims the legion marched north into Britain and got annihilated so completely that Rome basically shrugged and changed the subject. That version is wonderfully dramatic, which is exactly why people love it. The trouble is that evidence linked to the legion later appeared in the Netherlands, suggesting it may have been moved rather than destroyed in Scotland. After that, the story becomes murky. Was it wiped out in another campaign, dissolved, absorbed, renamed, or simply lost in the bureaucratic blur of imperial military history? Rome built roads, forts, and administrative systems across half the known world, yet somehow still left us arguing over the fate of an entire legion. Very efficient empire. No notes. 20. The Lost Army of Cambyses is one of those ancient stories that sounds so extreme it almost dares you not to believe it. According to Herodotus, the Persian king sent a huge army through the Egyptian desert toward the oracle at Siwa, and the entire force was swallowed by a sandstorm. Thousands of soldiers gone beneath the desert like a kingdom owed the dunes money. For centuries, people have searched for proof, hoping to find skeletons, weapons, or camps that would finally pin the story to the ground. Claimed discoveries appear now and then wobble under scrutiny. There is also a rival theory that the army was not destroyed by nature at all, but defeated in conflict and later wrapped in a convenient desert legend. That possibility feels very ancient in the best way. Why admit military failure when you can blame the weather and let the sand do the public relations work? Either way, the army disappeared from history, which is why the story still grips people. 21. Percy Fawcett vanished in 1925 while searching the Amazon for a supposed lost city he called Zed, which is already the kind of sentence that should make everyone involved reconsider their life choices. Fawcett was not a clueless adventurer. He was experienced, respected, and familiar with South America. That is exactly why his disappearance hit so hard. He entered the Brazilian interior with his son Jack, and Jack's friend Raleigh Rimmel, sent a final message after reaching what became known as Dead Horse Camp, and then vanished. After that came rumors, rescue missions, false leads, speculation, and enough contradictory stories to fill a jungle-sized filing cabinet. Was he killed, lost, sick, absorbed into a local community, or simply swallowed by the Amazon in the most literal sense? The likeliest explanation is some mix of violence, miscalculation, isolation, or starvation. But the jungle is very good at erasing detail. Fawcett remains famous because his disappearance turned exploration into myth almost instantly. 22. The Viking settlements in Greenland did not vanish with one dramatic scream into the snow. They faded slowly, which is somehow even more haunting. Norse settlers arrived around the late 10th century and built farms, churches, and entire communities in a place that was never exactly rolling out a welcome carpet. For centuries, they survived on a combination of farming, hunting, trade, and sheer stubbornness. Then the settlements declined and disappeared from the record. Why? The answer is likely a brutal combination rather than one neat cause. Cooler climate during the Little Ice Age, shrinking trade with Europe, fragile local resources, social rigidity, and contact with Inuit peoples all probably mattered. Some settlers may have died, some may have left, and some may have been absorbed. What keeps the mystery alive is not that Greenland was difficult. That part is obvious. It is that a European colony held on there for centuries and then gradually slipped out of sight, leaving ruins, questions, and a lot of frozen humility. 23. The Anjikuni village story is a great mystery mainly because the real mystery may be how a likely hoax became so durable. The popular version claims that a trapper arrived at an Inuit settlement near Lake Anjikuni in Canada and found it completely abandoned under terrifying conditions. Meals left behind, graves disturbed, dogs dead, no people anywhere. It is a perfect campfire story, which is usually your first warning sign that reality may have already left the building. The tale spread through newspapers and later got stuffed with even more dramatic details until it became a full paranormal favorite. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police have said there is no evidence the event happened as described, and most researchers treat it as legend rather than fact. That does not stop people from retelling it every few years like they are legally required. So yes, it is a mystery, but not in the way believers hope. The puzzle is how fiction put on historical clothing and got away with it. 24. The question of who betrayed Anne Frank remains one of the most painful unresolved issues connected to the Holocaust. Anne, her family, and the others hiding in the secret annex were arrested in August 1944, and for decades people have tried to identify who informed the authorities. Many assume there must have been a specific betrayer, and several suspects have been proposed over the years. More recent investigations drew major attention by naming one possible figure, only for that conclusion to face serious criticism from historians and institutions closely connected to the case. The difficult truth is that no final answer has been proven. It is also possible the hiding place was discovered during an investigation into something else connected to the building, rather than through one direct act of betrayal. That uncertainty matters. This is not a tidy detective story. It is a human tragedy inside a system of persecution so vast and brutal that even one of its most famous episodes still resists complete explanation. 25. The Romanov mystery used to thrill people with two questions: who betrayed the family, and did any of them survive? On survival, the romantic version has mostly collapsed. DNA evidence eventually confirmed the identities of the remains, including those whose absence once fueled endless rumors about escape, especially around Anastasia. So the fairy tale exit is basically done. The deeper question is betrayal, and that answer is messier than a single villain. The family was destroyed by revolution, state collapse, war, and a decaying imperial system that had already lost control of events, long before the final execution in 1918. Yes, individuals carried out the killing, but the Romanovs had been politically abandoned by reality itself well before that basement. That is why the mystery still holds attention. People want one dramatic betrayer, one clean twist, one hidden survivor. History offers something uglier. A doomed dynasty trapped by its own failures and consumed by a world that had stopped believing in it. 26. Tutankhamun died young, rich, royal, and inconveniently mysterious, which is a very efficient recipe for endless speculation. For a long time, people loved the murder theory. A teenage pharaoh, palace politics, and a mummy with possible injuries? That practically writes its own dramatic documentary voiceover. But later, scientific studies complicated the picture. Evidence has pointed toward malaria, serious health problems, and perhaps a broken leg or another injury that became fatal. The dramatic blow-to-the-head idea lost much of its confidence as research improved. Still, no single explanation has ended the debate completely. He may have died from illness, accident, weakness, or a nasty combination of all three. That uncertainty is why the mystery remains alive. Tutankhamun is famous not only because his tomb was packed with treasure, but because even after all the scanning, testing, and expert arguing, the final cause of his death still refuses to stand still for a clean historical mugshot. 27. The Nazi gold train is one of those legends that seems genetically engineered to attract treasure hunters, journalists, and men who already own too many shovels. The story says an armored train loaded with gold, art, or other valuables vanished near the end of World War II, somewhere around Wałbrzych in modern Poland, supposedly hidden in tunnels before the Nazis lost control. It has everything a good legend needs: war, secrecy, buried loot, underground passages, and the irresistible idea that one massive hidden prize is still waiting to be found. The problem is that repeated searches have not produced the train. Excitement surges, radar scans get headlines, experts investigate, and then the evidence turns into geology or wishful thinking wearing a hard hat. That has not killed the story, because treasure legends do not die politely. They just get a new documentary and keep going. So the mystery remains, hovering somewhere between wartime chaos, local folklore, and humanity's refusal to stop digging for dramatic endings. 28. The treasure of the Knights Templar has survived for centuries because complex medieval asset distribution is not a sentence anyone wants to hear when vanished sacred fortune is available instead. The Templars were rich, influential, and deeply involved in finance, landholding, and the movement of wealth across Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. Then came the crackdown of 1307, when King Philip IV of France moved against the order. Ever since, people have asked the obvious question: where did all the treasure go? Theories exploded in every direction. Secret ships, hidden vaults, buried gold, sacred relics, lost archives, secret escape networks. Historians are less impressed. The order certainly had resources, but not all wealth existed as giant glittering piles waiting to be stolen by a novelist. Some assets were seized, some reassigned, some transferred, and some may have been moved in advance. The mystery survives because legend loves a missing jackpot, while history keeps offering paperwork and disappointment. 29. The Ark of the Covenant is not just a lost object. It is a lost object with enough religious, historical, and symbolic weight to dominate imaginations for thousands of years. In biblical tradition, it held the tablets of the law and represented divine presence among the Israelites. So when it disappeared from the historical record, that was not a minor filing issue. The most common broad assumption is that it vanished around the time of the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 before Christ. After that, the trail becomes a battlefield of tradition, faith, and speculation. Some believe it was hidden before the conquest. Others connect it to Ethiopia. Others think it was destroyed, looted, or simply lost in the chaos of history. No verified discovery has settled the matter. That is why the Ark remains so powerful as a mystery. It is not only about where an object went, it is about what happens when something sacred disappears and the silence itself becomes part of the story. 30. Atlantis is the ultimate historical temptation because it offers a lost civilization, a moral warning, a cataclysm, and just enough detail to keep people hunting for it forever. Plato described it as a powerful island society destroyed after becoming corrupt. Most scholars think he was using Atlantis mainly as a philosophical story, not handing out treasure maps. That should have ended the matter. Naturally, it did the opposite. Ever since, people have tried to pin Atlantis onto real places all over the planet. Santorini, Crete, Spain, the Atlantic, the Caribbean, Antarctica. Pick a coast, and somebody has blamed Atlantis for it. The most sensible historical idea is that Plato may have drawn on memories of real disasters, especially in the ancient Aegean world. But that is not the same as proving Atlantis existed exactly as described. The reason the mystery survives is simple. It lets people believe one elegant lost civilization might explain half of history, which is absurd and therefore incredibly popular. 31. Alexander the Great conquered an absurd amount of the known world and then somehow failed to keep track of his own tomb. After his death in Babylon in 323. Before Christ, his body became politically valuable because controlling it meant controlling part of his legacy. The funeral route was redirected to Egypt, and ancient sources suggest Alexander ended up buried in Alexandria, where his tomb was known and visited for generations. So this is not a mystery about whether he ever had a grave. He absolutely did. The mystery is how one of the most famous burial sites in antiquity later vanished from clear historical view. Earthquakes, looting, urban change, religious shifts, rebuilding, and the sheer chaos of a city occupied layer upon layer may all have played a role. Somewhere under modern Alexandria, perhaps, lies the tomb of a man who refused to stay small in life and somehow managed one final act of historical inconvenience after death. 32. Genghis Khan's tomb is missing for a reason that feels almost too perfectly on brand. It may have been hidden on purpose with extraordinary care. He died in 1227, and tradition says his burial place was concealed, possibly somewhere near the sacred landscape of Burkhan Khaldun in Mongolia. From there, the legends go fully dramatic. Funeral escorts killing witnesses, horses trampling the ground flat, rivers diverted, forests planted, anyone with too much information suddenly having a very bad day. Some of that is almost certainly embellishment. Because once a tomb becomes famous, people start adding security features like they are writing myth with a larger budget. Modern expeditions, remote sensing, and archaeological studies have narrowed possibilities but found nothing conclusive. That is part of what makes this mystery so powerful. One of the most feared conquerors in history may still lie in an unmarked grave, beyond fame, beyond empire, and wonderfully beyond the reach of souvenir shops. 33. Medieval maps sometimes show lands that never existed, which means cartographers once had a fascinating habit of mixing knowledge, rumor, optimism, and occasional hallucination into one decorated package. Phantom islands such as Friesland and High Brazil appeared on maps for decades or even centuries because sailors reported things badly, mapmakers copied one another, and nobody wanted to erase a place too quickly in case it turned out everyone else knew something they did not. That is the real charm of this mystery. These were not always wild fantasy drawings with dragons doing admin work in the corners. They were serious attempts to describe a half-known world using incomplete information. A false island could become real on paper simply through repetition. Once it entered maps, stories, voyages, and expectations began orbiting around it. So when old charts show impossible lands, the mystery is not that the world was magical. It is that human knowledge used to spread by confidence, copying, and very decorative guesswork. So now I want the comment section to turn into a courtroom. Which mystery in this video do you think is being covered up, overrated, or explained completely wrong? And what huge unsolved case did we not mention that absolutely deserved a spot here? No safe answers. Name it and defend it. If you want more weird, absurd, and genuinely mind-bending history, hit like, subscribe, and let's keep digging up the past until it gets uncomfortable.